Hello, I'm Rick Stivers. I'd like to welcome you to Young Martin's Reels. Today's project is going to be this Ted Williams 945 reel. And Chris, apparently I was mistaken, and this is not a J.C. Higgins reel. This is a Ted Williams reel. How I got that mixed up, I don't know, but that puts everything back in the ballpark. So per that discussion we were having, well, we'll have to continue it on another time. Anyway, this is a Ted Williams 945, and if this reel looks familiar to some of you, there's probably a good reason for it. If you look at this reel and match it up to this reel, which is the Daiwa 7000C, I think you will find that they are virtually identical, except for color and the badging. If you look at the handles, everything there is identical. The ribbing, where the screws are located, where it says 3 ball bearings here, it says 3 ball bearings here. These two reels are identical. I even took the spools and swapped them one day to see, and everything swapped over. So if you're looking to get real in-depth into the Daiwa 7000C or the Ted Williams 945, go over to my video on the Daiwa 7000C to see that. The only thing that didn't really get covered in that video was the bail, because this one was missing a bail. And I did the bail conversion and converted it over to bailless. So today, though, we're going to get that one out of the way, and we're going to work on this one. And I am still going to go ahead and take it apart and service it, but I don't know just how far we're going to get into it. Let's first off find out how well it works. Well, it's a dragging reel. It's yeah. All right, let's see if we got an anti-reverse. We do. It's kind of a loud anti-reverse, and I just managed to get it all wound up. That's the one thing about a spinning reel. If you spin it backwards and get the line all wrapped up, it doesn't take long for it to get messed up. Let's see how the bail operates. Not too bad. Let's see about the drag. Okay. It's got an operational drag with a clicker. So let's get started on this thing, and let's pull it down. First thing I'm going to do is lower the camera down a little bit so that I can see. There we go. All right. We're going to start off by taking off the spool. By taking off the drag knob, we're going to, yeah, that definitely needs to be cleaned up. Take the, all right, there we go. There's the spool. Okay. Chris, does it look familiar? All right, let's go ahead and we're going to take out this screw on this side. And that should allow us to slide the handle out. There we go. And now we are going to take out these 3 screws out of the side plate. There comes the side cover off. Reasonably clean inside. The bearing is free to turn, so that's not bad. All right, those 3 screws are identical, so they're over here. And we need to take well, first off, let's take that anti-reverse and disable it. And then we're going to back this screw down. We're going to bring our anti-reverse, our crosswind block all the way down to where we can get hold of it with the screwdriver and take that screw out. Now, with that screw out, we should be able to slide the axle assembly out, which it doesn't want to move yet. So let's see here. It's moving out just a little bit. And if axles give you too much trouble, what you can do is slip the spool back on, or you can usually even just use this knob. There's our drag knob. Put it on, it gives you something to really grab hold of. Okay. The axle is moving fine right until it gets to right there and it's jamming. I wonder why. Let's see if the main gear will come out. No, it cannot come out. So what's causing us to jam up? Is it just that the crosswind block is jamming sideways? Yep, that's all it was. It was a crosswind block hanging up. All right, there is our There's our axle shaft, and we were given way too many napkins the other day when we went to McDonald's, so I told my wife, I said, don't throw those away, I'll make use of them. So let's wipe the axle down. All right, that looks a lot better. We'll have to do some more in-depth cleaning up here, but we'll get that cleaned up. Now, with that out, we should be able to take the main gear out, like so, and the axle came out, or the bearing came out on both sides with it, and so we may end up leaving those on, but this one is very gummy, but it is turning. So, well, no, it's not turning either. Okay. We may have to do a little work on that bearing. Might have to put it into soak. All right, we've got that done. Now we're going to take out the crosswind block, like so. And the crosswind gear. Well, it feels like it's got a screw in it, and it does. Okay, it's just covered over by grease. So let's see what screwdriver is going to take to get that out. It's a very thin bladed screw. There we go. Okay. It's got us down to here. And let's wipe the excess grease off of there. All right, now we're going to take this screw out, or at least that's the plan. See which way it goes. Yep, it tightened that way, it seemed. So, there we go. Okay, it takes that out. All right, now, these three screws, the only thing that they're doing is holding in the anti-reverse cog. So, there's really no point in taking those three screws out. All right, come back to here. We do want to take this bearing out so that we can get the pinion shaft out. Well, doesn't appear to be a good fit. All right, all three of those screws are the same. I'll take the bearing retainer out. And there's the pinion gear out. And now the only thing we're going to look at is our anti-reverse to make sure that's all moving freely. And it is. So we're going to wipe out the excess old grease out of here. And now there's grease left in there that doesn't want to come out. And the way I deal with that is I will spray that with some WD-40. Now, I've got an old towel. Rather than mess up my background here, I've got an old towel that I sit down, and normally I do this in my lap, and I'll spray the WD-40 in here, and that will begin to dissolve all of that grease that's in there. And I will take a brush. I typically like a straight bristle brush because it will get down in all the corners and such. And I will basically just use it as a scrubbing tool. Just kind of probe and push and move things around. And what it does, it just helps the WD-40 dissolve the grease the rest of the way. And then I'll use it as like a paintbrush almost to wipe up the excess and get it out of there. Once I've done that, I will come back with a Q-tip. Now, some people will say, just use a cotton swab. Well, I went and bought some cotton swabs when I first started doing this that were not Q-tip brand, and they just kind of tendency to just fall apart and leave cotton strands every daggone place I turned. So I have gone back to using original Q-tip brand Q-tips just because they seem to work just fine for me, and they don't fall apart like the no-name brand ones did. And the Q-tip will get down in all those corners, and you can stick it down in there, and you can do a little twirling action on it, and it will rub that stuff out of the corners. All right. And that's got all that cleaned up. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to pause the video, and I'm going to go clean up all the rest of these parts. Everything except this spool, and I'll come back to that. And I will also come back to this rotor because we're going to be taking this apart so you can see how it works inside. And we'll take that. But everything else I'm going to go ahead and clean up and get ready to reassemble. All right, we're back with everything pretty much cleaned up. Everything except this for the spool and the rotor is cleaned up now. And Chris asked me a question last night about how it is that I go about keeping everything organized so that I know where everything goes back to. And part of it is just for short periods of time, I have a pretty good memory. But I also keep things grouped. And by that, what I mean is, let's take a look. Okay, over here in this group, this is the side panel and the 3 screws that go in it. Okay, over here are my pinion gear and my main gear. Now, if you look at the main gear, you will see that I have everything grouped together there with the washers and the spacers. This bearing here goes on there. So I keep all that together. Then you've got the handle with the screw over here. Over here, we've got our crosswind gear, which actually will go over here with the rest of the crosswind stuff. Here, I've got my spool and my knob together. There's the rotor. Along beside the rotor is going to be the nut that holds it on. Then we've got the axle shaft, and we've got the crosswind block, crosswind gear. These 2 washers go on the axle shaft over here. This screw goes in here. This screw goes in here. So I can just basically keep things grouped together. All right. So let's see about starting to put everything back to. Oh, I see something I missed. A little bit of dirt down in this corner here. And once you get it all back together, it's kind of hard to get into some of these nooks and crannies. So let's take a moment to clean that out. All right. The first thing we're going to need to do is put this bearing back in down here. Now, this bearing's got two sides. It has a sealed side and a shielded side. And we're going to put the sealed side to the outside, which helps protect this from water intrusion. Let's see about getting that pressed down in there, like so. Now, once I've got that in there, I'm going to come back and give it a shot of oil. And I've exercised that bearing. What I did is, I'll show you on this one. I still haven't gotten around to buying that bearing tool. And so what I do is I take my hemostats and I slide the bearing on here and I open the hemostats up like so. And by doing so, it'll lock that center in, and now I can spin the bearing, and I can add, if I need to clean it, I can do more cleaning, and if I need to add oil, I can oil it. So that's how I do that. Okay, we've got that part on. Now we're going to come back, and we're going to put our oscillating gear in, and it's going to have this screw. Now, this is going to need to be lubricated everywhere. It gets lubricated on the back, it gets lubricated on the front, and on all of the teeth. Now, does that mean you just want to put a big honking wad of grease in there? No, you just want enough grease to take care of what needs to be done. Anything that is excess is just going to press off and not stay where, and not do it any good. All right, so we're going to set it in there. We're going to add a little bit of grease to the front and try to align that hole a little bit, like so. Now we'll drop the screw into the hole and see if we can't screw that in. All right, with that done, the gear should move freely, which it does. And I'm going to put 1 drop of oil in here just in case the grease doesn't migrate properly. All right. With that done, we're going to come back and we're going to work on the pinion gear. We're going to slide the bearing off of the pinion gear for the moment. And we are going to grease the pinion gear. We're going to put a little bit over here on the shoulder because it's going to have to go into this hole over here, right into there. Put a little grease in there. Now we're going to put the bearing on, and it's shielded bearing either way, but it's not sealed, so you can just put it either way. And I've already oiled it several times, but I'm going to slide it back in, and I'm going to oil it one more time. Give that oil a chance to soak into that bearing. Now we're ready to put the bearing retainer back on. Okay, we've put the bearing down in the hole. It's time to put these main gear back in. Now we've got a shim gear. Then this oscillating gear comes off of the main gear. And we're going to put a little bit of grease here just to hold things. So we don't need a whole lot of grease there, just a little. And we're going to slide the oscillating gear back on like so, and it's got a shim in here, and we want to make sure that that shim is where it belongs. So it's right here on the outside of this gear. Now we're going to grease the oscillating gear and the main gear. Once that's done, we're going to flip it over and we're going to put a little bit on this side in order to hold this shim washer in place. All right. Now, pay attention because you need to make sure that that shim washer goes in between the bearing, which would go on now, and the gear. And the same thing on this other side. Okay, the bearing's already down there. There's the shim washer in between the gear and that. All right, so let's go ahead and set this main gear back down inside. There we go. Make sure it meshes with the gears. Rotate a little if necessary. Now this bearing is the other one that goes in the other side, and we're going to put the shielded side out, or sorry, sealed side out. Snap it into place, and we're going to put another coating of oil on that bearing. Set that down. Now it's time for the crosswind block to go in. So let's go ahead and lubricate the crosswind block. Once it's lubricated, it's going to sit back down inside. It has to go underneath this bar on this side, and then it's got to go over top of that post in the middle on the gear. Once that's done, it'll sit in place, and you're about ready to put your axle shaft in. Now, what do you still got to put in for the axle shaft? You're going to have to put the rotor in. And since we haven't taken the rotor apart yet, we're going to pause at this point, and we're going to take this rotor apart. So we're going to start off by taking this nut off of this side. All right, we're going to cheat. Use a crescent wrench. There we go. Okay, so we're going to remove the nut and then slide this off like so. And then we're going to put the nut back on to hold everything together so nothing gets lost. And then we're going to give this a shot of WD-40 and let it sit. Now we're going to come back to this other side, and we're going to take this screw out right here. And I may need to loosen it with a, nope. Okay. I took that screw out, and that takes that assembly off. And yeah, we need to spray that down and let it soak for a minute and see if we can't clean that up. Because it's not rusty or anything. That's just old grease. And that's going to dissolve and come right out of there. But we need to let it sit for a few minutes. All right, we're going to go to this other side now and take this apart. And it seems to be moving pretty well. Is that? Oh, that's one of the curved holes. I have a special tool for that. If it's not too wide. And it's not. Okay. There we go. It's almost too wide to go into this one. Okay. And this is trying to pop off because it's spring loaded. All right, there we go. There's our spring right there. Bring it in. Okay, we're going to take this screw out. Yeah, I'm going to have to break it loose first. All right, got the plate off. There's our spring. Yeah, that spring's got a lot of tension on it. I tried to make one of these for a Shimano yesterday, and I was totally unsuccessful. All right, we're going to scrub this up real quick. I'm going to go off camera to do that. That was a lot of fun, and it's reasonably clean now. And we're ready to start reassembling again. Let me clean this out one last time. All right. Now the first thing we got to do is put this spring back in, and we got to get it back in the right way. If we try to put it in this way, it's not going to work because that's not the right way for it. The long arm comes up towards the bail arm. The short arm goes down over here. Okay, and we're going to bring this up and lock it into place over here when we go to finalize tightening down this side plate. So let's go ahead before we get to that point, and let's put a little grease on it here. And we're going to put a little bit inside. All right. Now we'll set this cover back on. Set it in place. Now, we're not going to be able to screw it all the way down yet because, see, this arm is still sticking out over here. All right, so we're going to take and start to screw. And we're going to get it down to where we're almost snug. And then we're going to bring this spring up over here. Get it down in there like so. And then we're going to start working on tightening this cover down like so. Okay, that's got the spring held in place by the cover. Now, we're going to take this piece and we're going to set this in. See this post that sticks out right here? That's got to go into this groove right here in this slot. And this wire from the spring has to go into this little hole right here. So we're going to line that up like so. And then we're going to bring this around and we're going to line everything up and get all those where they need to be. And then we're going to fight the spring because it's going to want to fight us. Okay? Matter of fact, we might even bring it down a little bit. Okay? And we've got to try to hold that in place while we get the screw started. So, you got to get the screw ready. Bring it around and get that screw started. And this takes a bit of hand strength and a bit of dexterity to get going. All right, now screws in. There we go. All right, let's put a shot of oil onto the bail arm and under the head of the screw. Now we got a little grease under it already, so, and that makes it move much more freely. All right, now we're gonna back up a little bit. Okay. Now we're going to come over here and put this side back on, which is just a matter of setting it in place and tightening down the screw. Now, we've got to put this back together, but first we've got to take this roller the rest of the way apart and clean it. So let's take the nut off, then the washer. Now that washer's got a sleeve built into it. All right, let's go ahead and clean that. Like so. Okay, and I'm going to run a Q-tip that's had most of the tip pulled off of, run through there to clean out the insides. So if there's any micro sand in there, it'll get it out. Okay, next, we're gonna take this roller assembly off and we're gonna run a Q-tip through there as well. So that if there's any abrasive materials in there, it should come out. There we go. One final thing is to wipe off the shaft, and we are going to slide this piece back on into the sleeve, a roller. We are going to, well, before we do that, let's do this. Let's put oil on the sleeve, slide it into the roller. Then we're going to put oil inside the roller, put it onto the post here, turn this around so that the washer side of the sleeve is sticking out, and then slide that back on like so. Roll it around a little bit, make sure it turns freely, and then slide this back in. Put our nut back on. Tighten it down like so. There we go. We're ready to put the rotor back on, but we need to lubricate this anti-reverse arm here. Put a little under the head, put some on the spring so that it has not much abrasion. And then we're going to put a little bit on the back side of this lever so that, there we go. And let's put a little on this side. There we go. All right, that'll keep that operating. And we're going to flip it into anti-reverse override for the moment and slide the rotor back on. Then we're going to put the nut back on. Okay, we're catching in a bind because we haven't installed the axle shaft yet. So here's our axle shaft. We're going to put a little grease, very little grease, on the axle shaft. But I want to make sure, even though it's just a little bit, I want to make sure it's all the way around the axle shaft, because once this is in, it's not going to get the opportunity to turn anymore. So if you've only got grease on one side of it, the other side's going to stay unlubricated. Okay, so we're going to slide that in now. Slide it in and get it lined up in the crosswound block. Slide it in until that hole lines up that the screw's going to go through right there. So if you didn't see that, we're going to pull it out. So, okay, see there? We're going to line it up to where it lines up with the screw hole. And we're going to put the screw back in. Now this should rotate without much trouble. It's still unsupported on this side, but it's not catching in a bind anymore. All right, we're going to click the anti-reverse the other way, and we have anti-reverse. All right, let's go ahead and turn that off. We're ready to put the side cover back on. And I remember we oiled this one more time, so it's been oiled 3 times now. And let's clean this side case just a little bit more. I guess that really was as clean as it was going to come. All right, we're going to slip that on. Drop it down. Like so. It should kind of almost snap into place, but there is no snap on it. It just kind of gets in there real tight. And we're going to put these 3 screws back in. All right, we've got 2 spacer washers here that need to go onto the axle shaft. We can reinstall the handle now. I've already let's see. This handle screws and unscrews here. It's difficult to do when it's off the reel. Now I'll get it back on the reel and we'll do it then. In, put our screw back in. All right, let's see which way this turns. Let's lock this way. There we go. Now, if you turn this in a counterclockwise direction, it loosens the handle so that you can fold it down, like so. All right, to tighten it back up, you just turn it back in the clockwise direction. If you don't have a whole bunch of grease and oil on your hands, it should tighten up just fine. All right. Now let's do the rotor. First thing I'm going to do is clip off this excess line. I'm going to be stripping all this line off. Just don't have it off yet. Okay. We are going to pull the retainer spring clip out of the top of this. We're going to lift out the drag assembly. All right. With that done, I'm going to spray some WD-40 in here. And we're going to see what we can do to clean this rotor up. No, sorry, spool. All right, I'm very happy with the design of this reel, but this part right here, I'm a little less than thrilled about. And that is the clicker for the drag, and it's made out of plastic. And I've never been a big fan of plastic clickers. And I'm gonna take this one out in order to clean the inside of the spool without taking a chance on breaking that plastic clicker. Now with the inside of the spool cleaned off, now I feel comfortable about setting the clicker back in and putting the screw back in. I just didn't want to take a chance on breaking that plastic clicker off with a rag or a Q-tip. All right, this is a Teflon drag washer setup, so there's no need for oil in it. And I believe that these are stainless steel, so the lubricant isn't going to do those much good either. So we're going to start off by putting in one of the plastic or Teflon washers. Then we're going to follow it up by the keyed washer. It's got this kind of a rectangular shape on the inside of it there. All right. Next is going to go another drag washer, and this old dead line is really starting to bug me. All right, followed up by the eared washer, because it's got the little ears out on each end of it, right there. And those little ears have to go into these slots right here. Put those in. Another drag washer, and then the last keyed washer goes in. And then that's going to be followed up by the retaining spring clip. And make sure to get it into the slot so that it will actually retain like it's supposed to. Like so. All right, and at that point, it's ready to go back onto the reel. It should drop down and you should hear the clicker. All right, put on the drag knob. Tighten it down. Got a nice drag. Okay, and we're going to add a shot of oil into the handle to help keep it spinning up. Still making a little squealing noise. We'll add a little bit of oil down here. There we go. All right, so there you have the Ted Williams 945. And Chris, I have no idea why I kept calling this thing a J.C. Higgins, because it's not. It is a Ted Williams. So I apologize for that. We'll have to call and talk about that and discuss it later, how I made that mistake. I have no idea. There we go. Brake. Let's see about the, there we go. The bell trips beautifully. All right, so there you have the Ted Williams 945, fully functional, does everything it's supposed to do, and it's a beast of a reel. If you ever wanted a 7000C and couldn't afford one, maybe you should look for the Ted Williams 945 because they are the same exact reel. If you encounter one sitting out there inexpensively, maybe even this one out there on eBay, there's the reel for you. And for now, that's Rick Stivers with Young Martin's Reels, signing out.